Right, so we're on box number 8 for those people who've got repairs in. Box number 8. So this is from Kevin and Maxcom 4E, and could I change the mic plug as well? Oh, what was that? No transmit, but the red light comes on. Now we'll have to do this power lead. Well, that's a shame, isn't it? Binatone 5-star mic. Somebody's going to be absolutely gagging for a 5-star mic. So yeah, we'll certainly do that. It's had the lead shortened at some point, but seeing as I can't get screened leads, yes, I know there's retailers with the odd one or two, but not in the... I'm not prepared to buy less than 25, you see. Right, we'll hopefully do that in a bit, because I'd like to do this set on one of our own mics first. Now, we're going to have to sort this power lead out. That needs a fuse holder, and I am required to make sure they're correct. And there's two versions. I don't know if any of you have seen, apart from the video I did, the Super 4E. Of course, that knob's come off the Cobra version, hasn't it? Was it the 21XFM? So this has been a bit of a mix and match set, hasn't it, over the years? They're usually date coded, but that's the plate's missing on the back of this. Now these are very reliable. Can't speak. These are very reliable sets, but as we know, the chassis is very much Mr. Average, and it's the same chassis used in the Midland Precision series. With what bit of power lead he's got, we will power it up that way. And Mr. Chippy can sort the power lead out later. So we'll power it up on 9 volts at 350 milliamps. And it's lit up. It's drawing 250 milliamps, so we'll now swap to 13.8 volts at 1.6 amps. So there we are again, now drawing 266 milliamps. So have I got a speaker with 5-pin DIN on it, which actually is wired Maxcom? That's the dreadful Cobra, what am I on about? That's the dreadful Uniden mic, which is not screened. This is 5 DIN, but it doesn't mean it's for Maxcom. That's not for Maxcom. You've got LCL, some of the sets use 5 DIN, and you've got oh, the similar ones. Come on, Tango 21. DNT, and there's slightly different wiring between the two, so the mics aren't interchangeable. And I think I've forgotten to label this, so one day I'll find out what it fits. So in view of not having a Maxcom mic just handy, we'll see whether I can get the customer's mic to work sufficiently for today. But he's right, it certainly needs a new plug. Well, it's making it go into receive. And as he says, there's transmit lights coming on, but there's no power. I expect it's had a bad SPR and it's wrecked the output or driver transistor. So we'll get a piece of paper like we do. And today, I saw a Hermes parcel label. The printer turned 2 out instead of 1. Imagine they're not called Hermes this week, are they? They're called Every this week, but it'll be called something else next week. Do you remember the chocolate bar Marathon, which became Snickers, which was its international name anyway? They spent years and years and years advertising Marathon, and then they changed it, so all those years of advertising disappeared. You know what? I've never bought one since it's changed name. I know it's the same bar, but there you go. Perhaps I'm fat enough anyway, that's probably the reason. Maxcom 4E. You know, it's like business takes over another business, and you were a customer of the other business, and then when you look into the directors, the new owners, they're right scumbags. You know, constantly going bankrupt every 3 years and running around in expensive yachts. He said, no, I don't. And you think, I don't want to be a customer of this firm anymore. And it's like they automatically think that they're going to buy this business with X number of thousands or millions of customers, and they're going to get all those customers. No, the customers are going to walk because they don't like the ownership. Yeah, you've got to think about what you're buying. So, Maxcom 4E, I've got to look on the time because I've got to do Mrs. Thingy's shopping. No TX. So that's most of that out of the window. So we'll set the signal generator so that we're on 27.79125. We'll just dial that in. I can hear it receiving as we approach that frequency. We'll switch the synad meter on and we'll plug it all into the back of the set. So at the moment the signal generator is now on 1 microvolt. So we'll switch this camera, this inset picture, well, I haven't got an inset picture, we'll switch that to camera 4, which is the not quite in position. It's propped up on the Fidelity 1000, that camera. Right, so what have we got? There we are, we've got 0.95 microvolts. I think Maxcom do it as 10. So we'll just make sure I've got all of them. So it's 0.83 for 10 dB. And just in case they do 20, well, I'll get the paperwork out. It is 2.2. So at least we know what it's starting off at, and that's acceptable, being less than 1. I've known some Rotel 240s do worse than that. So I'm going to go into transmit, but I'm going to have our little handheld here. Get rid of that cobweb. Where's that come from? Apart from my head. So we'll just turn that down. I'll just put this into transmit. 1, 2. So 1, 2, 1, 2. So we know straight away that this is in fact transmitting a few inches. 1, 2, 1, 2. So we know that the phase lock loop's locked, all that kind of thing. So it's going to be the driver or the output transistor. There's a very quick check. Just make sure it transmits a few inches. So we don't need to do too much faffing. It's going to be pretty straightforward as to what's happened. So as far as the owner goes, he's had a bad SWR, or the person he's bought it off has had a bad SWR, and that really needs to be addressed immediately, or he's going to be sending the set back with the same problem, which is going to cost him. You can see why Boots the Chemists and Woolworths failed to be successful in selling Citizens Band radios, because they would get wrecked by customers. I actually knew someone who bought a brand new Amstrad 900 from Comet, $79.99, and put a 13 amp plug on the end of it and plugged it into the mains and blew the setup. You know, you got that kind of level of lack of knowledge. So we'll pop the speaker off. I'll tell you what, that doesn't look like it's ever been unsoldered. Leads to the speaker are pretty corroded. I'm not going to touch them, they're green and black. So chances are it's going to be, you know, that's not the original device. NEC 2SC1306. I'm sure it was a 2078 in these, but I'll have to check with the information. We're going to obviously have to take both sides off. We'll take picture in picture off because it's pointless while we try and diagnose this thing. And Mr. Chippy has been indexing the parts we have in stock, and he's tested, because we have fallen to buying some fake parts. and he's tested every single transistor we have in stock to see whether the parameters are in the data book correctly. And if he thinks they're outside, if they're outside those parameters, he's put them in a separate envelope and he's put a star on them, denoting chances are that they're fake. So there we go. I bought 100 transistors from AliExpress, two SC1815s, and I bought 100 for £1 plus postage. I think postage was about £2.75, and they're not fake. So, you know, just because they're dead cheap doesn't mean they're fake. So it can happen. So by the time we've had them posted, they're still only about 4p each, which is fantastic. So they've both been changed before. So the quickest way to check this is with the, dare I say it, the Russian probe we have. Right, so I've got that set pretty high, so without even bothering to worry as to which connection goes where, and that's the driver transistor. Wow, lots of RF there. That's the driver transistor, lots of RF there. There's the output transistor, lots of RF there, lots of RF there. So should be transmitting. You know what? It's probably a dry joint. Because it's been messed with before. I think the best course of action now is to clean it with isopropyl alcohol. Mr. Chippy's made me buy my own toothbrush. He says, I'm fed up of seeing your videos and my toothbrush being missing. We'll just cut the power. Don't you think I do this with the sets on? And we'll get the isopropyl alcohol on this and clean up some of this previous dodgy soldering. And it may be that we can spot a dry joint. Because I've done absolutely nothing to it except put the diode probe on. And it started working. So I went to one of these discount shops which we have. I think it was it Poundland or was it? Oh no, it was Home Bargains, and the hardest toothbrush they did, 99p. So there you go. We do have the correct brushes from RS, which are £5.95 each. This has probably been in everyday use for 40 years. Now, I may have, if I have to send this across to Mr. Chippy, there's a video microscope on his bench. But let's see whether I can see anything. I can see one dry joint, and it's the middle pin of the driver transistor, and it's not that it isn't soldered, it's that it wasn't clean when it was soldered. So it's just like you get with those Shogun radios. What I'm going to do, having unsoldered it, go to clean it with the fiberglass brush. Now this doesn't mean it's the fault, but it's a very good reason why this. Where's my solder gone? Got a little bit of solder on here, about 3 inches long. What could have happened is I could have prodded it into working and there still is a fault on a transistor. Make sure that where it goes onto the aerial connector it isn't iffy. Now I know it was receiving. What's that bit? Oh, it's there. I'm just wondering what that bit of sleeving is. Right, I think that's dry enough to power back up. Still receiving. Still transmitting. So at the moment it's doing 2.5 watts. So it's 2.5 watts. Frequency we'll take with a pinch of salt because the test set's only been on the duration of this video. It needs to be on half an hour like any other laboratory instrument does. But we'll just see what it's got to say. Oh, good grief, that's fine. 27,79135, and the deviation 1, 2, 1. Oh, good grief. 1.4 kilohertz. It's like a new set that needs to. You know, you'd think that was a new set with 2.5 watts and 1.4 kilohertz. So I'm going to go back into transmit. I do have a vibrator on here. I don't really want to show that on the video. So if I have to use that, we'll pause the video. When I was at Nottingham Radio, we had vibrators on each benches, which is what kind of gave me the idea. It was that Mr. and Mrs. Smith had come to that conclusion. And we had a customer come in the workshop with a taxi radio. And after he left, the vibration on my bench had gone missing. We didn't say anything. Just went to the pound shop and bought another. I just don't like these kind of faults. You know, I might have hit that in one, but I think I'll pass this across to Mr. Chippy just to look on the microscope, just in case. You know, that might be it. Now, I've only ever changed one capacitor in one of these. They don't seem to go bad. There's no reason to do the VCO on this because the set hasn't come in. I'll just check it on channel 40, check it on channel 1. They're not susceptible to being problematic in that department. Sometimes the components for checking the VCO aren't even fitted. They're around this area and they're not fitted on this one, so it can be a bit of a faff. They'll probably use a pin jig in the factory. They'll place the radio, it'll be clamped down, and pins on the baseboard will clamp to the bit where they're measuring it, so it saves them putting in about 3 or 4 components, which of course cuts costs. So we've done the VCO many times on this chassis, so I don't need to do it every time. So let's see whether we can get a bit more than 2.5 watts out of it. I usually can. Let's hope none of the cores are broken. So the first one is peak correctly. The second one is peaked correctly. third one is peaked. That needs a bit more heating up from that. I'm being careful because it's polythene and we don't want to melt the polythene. That's it. Nope, that's in its peak position. It could have had its airspace coils fiddled with. I'll just check with the manual that isn't to do with the third harmonic filter, and I'll check with the spectrum analyzer if it is. So have some of these coils been messed with? Just make sure that's compressed. The slightest wrong positioning of these airspace coils can make all the difference, let alone the people who play with them. I know some sets you have to play with them, it's in the manual to do so. It's 2.6 watts. Just look at this one. Yeah, that's correct. And this one, making sure these parts are in the right place, because they're not, you know. A lot of these positions are critical. Well, I'll put the spectrum analyzer on. Switch to the spectrum analyzer. We'll find where it is. There we are. So, just press auto find, press transmit, press auto find. Let's see where we are. So we've got a whacking great big signal there. Let's just pop it up to third harmonic. we've got one there. That's absolutely fine. It's minus 90 something. I just want to make sure it's not transmitting in the middle of aircraft band. So what's about 112 meg? We have got that one. Minus 111. That's absolutely fine. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just a bit low on power. I'll look at what transistors have been put in it, and I'll compare with what should be in it. But I don't think it's worth the kind of money that would be for the range difference between 2.5 watts and 4 watts. Remember, these are real watts. If I put the Zetagi power meter on this, it's probably doing 4 watts anyway. You've got to appreciate my test set here is only looking at, on that range, let me just tell you what it's looking at. It's only looking at like 24 to 33 megs. So anything outside of there it's going to reject. Now on an ordinary power meter, I've said this a million times before, if you have an ordinary SWR meter, which you can use as a power meter, and obviously use it with a dummy load, and you can't take a power in with an aerial, you find out everything we've seen on that spectrum analyzer, it's all added up together, and that's your power. So you can end up with somebody, especially with the Amstrads, when they've been daft enough to take the ballast resistor out, and you end up with, I've shown this before, we had a set where it said it was doing 7 watts on the power meter, but when we looked into it, it was doing 2.5 watts on 27 megs. It was doing 4 watts on 112 megs aircraft band, you know, because that's what happens. Oh, it's doing 7 watts. Well, it isn't. So this is doing 2.5, and at least it's where it should be. So, 2SC1306, and if I carefully bend over the other device, let's see whether I can see what it is. And the answer is I can't. The thing is, because these have been changed before, and the printed circuit isn't as good a condition as it once was, I'm not sure whether it's going to disintegrate. There could be a component missing there. Capacitor 163. Now this can happen. Somebody can break a component in swapping something else, and where it doesn't matter. Well, it might matter. Now, of course, we all know there's blank spaces for other options for other models, but that could be important. So that looks like it was once soldered in that corner, and it isn't there now. But I'll check with the service information. But I can't see any other dry joints. So what we'll do, we'll carry on with some of this. I really ought to get the notes out, because some of this is going to be guesswork otherwise. But let's go in for receive. Now these sets enjoy I'll tell you what, I think we can put it on frequency now. These sets enjoy having the detector go out. It's one of their favourite pastimes, more than any other make of set, and that's the only little foible they have in my experience. So let's see where we're on frequency now. (27.79134). It's hardly worth touching, but I just will. I want it higher than that. Plus it drop with age. There we go. So that's that done. I can't remember where deviation is offhand. It's either that one or that one. I think we'll leave some of those till later. But I want to just go through the receiver just before I have to disappear off. So see whether we can improve it from where it was at 0.83 microvolts. Let's move that manually again. So I want 4 dB on... Oh no, well, I'll tell you what, we'll start with the S9 because we need to do the detector, don't we? So put the oscilloscope on, turn the bench light off and turn the volume until we get a meaningful trace on the oscilloscope. About there. And then with the appropriate tool, which is covered in Japanese earwax, is the coil there. You know what, it was spot on. So we'll go back to the cyanide meter, put the bench light back on, turn the oscilloscope off, and we'll get 4 dB, so we're not saturating the receiver, and let's see what we can get. So no improvement there. Tiny improvement there. Tiny improvement there. No improvement there. So I'm going to recheck the first one with some of this being interactive. No. So let's see what we've got now. So it's exactly the same, there's no difference whatsoever. It's 0.83 microvolts. Whether or not we've changed anything else, see where 20s. 2.2, it's exactly the same. That's fine. But we've gone through the effort of doing it. Sometimes there is an S meter preset and sometimes there isn't. I think it's the one up there if it's fitted. So let's go for an S9 signal. It's reading 7 and a bit. No, it's not that preset. So I'll come back when I've done Mrs. Thingy's shopping and we'll get the manual out and go through the rest of what this radio needs. I think I'll switch it off and then make sure it still transmits when I switch it back on from cold. Right, I'm back from Mrs. Thingy's shopping. So I've been looking at the circuit. It's pretty cheeky. When I went on the internet I noticed there's 2 copies of this available to download and they're both pinched off me. Right, well I mean it doesn't matter really because it's proliferation of the circuits which is important to me. So 2SC1306 is fitted and it should be 2SC2078 and the driver should be 2SC2314. So let's look it up in towers and see. I'm going to have to take out the driver transistor to find out what they put in, which is not something I wanted to do, but I can also have a word with the customer, but it would probably be nice to sort it out. So let's finally get to some Japanese devices. Oh, you could also download manufacturers' data sheets and do this, but seeing as I've got towers, this is what we use. So 2SC 2078. So there we are. So basically it's an 80 volt device. It's 10 watts capable. Sanyo. It's an RF transistor, which we know. So what's the frequency? It's supposed to be good for 100 megs. So let's look up 2SC1306. So that 2SC1306 40 megs. It's Hitachi. .65 volt. Oh, it's the HFE we wanted to look at, isn't it? Which is 50. HFE is 50. And let's see what it's capable of. Uh, 12 watt. So HFE is 50. I need to go back to the other one because I missed the HFE off, which was the most important parameter I was looking for. So back to 2078, and that's your gain. So it's 25 to 50. HFE is 25 to 50. Now we'll look up the 2314. So really, you know, they're going to do the same thing. You know, if that's got a gain of 50, that's got a gain of 50. The set's running on 12 volts. I mean, it's developing more than that in its RF circuit. They're both capable of a similar. So you know, they're much of a muchness, those two. There should be no difference. So let's look at the driver and see where the problem is. It could be, of course, that the transistor's damaged and not doing that gain anymore, in which case we'll test it. Well, I'm trying to cut the customer's costs down. So 2SC2314 has an HFE (60 to 320). Lead out is L70. 45 volts. It's Sanyo. So that's, you know, they've kept the two Sanyos, haven't they, there? So I'm going to have to unsolder what's in, and we'll see what's happened. Just make sure the power's off. It wasn't. I normally send sets across to Mr. Chippy to desolder things. So if you remember, the writing was towards the chassis. Now this is broken getting it out. It was a 2SC2314. It may still work. Where's my transistor tester? This has just been overhauled with new leads. So it's 190 it's doing. Right, now we're not going to put it back broken like that because it wouldn't last. I've got a scrap AM set here. Has it still got a driver transistor in it? And is it the same? This was a Midland 100M. I'll pop this out, and lo and behold, it's a 2SC2314, just the same. That's why it's useful having smashed up illegal radios. Sometimes they come in boxes of junk. Right, back to the test meter. It's safe putting a new one on if this works, but I want it to have a gain better than 190. So it works. Gains 149. So I'll put that to one side. I think we're going to have to take the output transistor out. This is where it will have to be a new one because you end up with short legs in that. Don't forget you need to put thermal heat compound on these, and all that insulation kit back, because the tabs need to be isolated from the chassis. There's a mica washer, there's a polythene washer, bushing, shall we say. I think the mic is going to stay put. I'll just put those together so they don't run away from me while I'm not looking. We'll just unsolder this. So one of the legs has come off this just through corrosion, and this could be exactly where the problem lay. So with no help from me, you know what, that looks like it's come off before and it's been soldered on. So no, that's not something we'll be putting back either. But out of interest, let's see how well it works. $20. That's where our problem lies. So should be 50. The minimum acceptable on the 2078 would be 25. So it's out of spec whichever way we look at it. So forgetting about the lid, it's knackered. So I think we'll try and use this recovered transistor, because that's going to keep the cost down for the customer. The gain isn't out of spec, but it's lower than what was in. But if we put an output transistor in that's half decent, like new, so that's what we'll do. So I'll pop that back in. I'll just make sure it goes in from the top side first. This is a sensible thing to do. The last thing you want to do is have tight pins and then already weakened print gets worse. It may just be too much solder on the end still. It costs me far more time to try and recover a part to cut the customer's costs, because we're more or less doing these at a fixed price. So it's like I spend my £3 to save him £2. I just assume that everybody's skinned like me. There, that's going through fine. So we'll pop that in, remembering that the writing is to the chassis. And there we are, all the legs are through. Right, we'll solder that up when I've got another device. I want a 2S. Well, this isn't good news because we haven't got two SC2078 in stock. We have got two SC2075, and that is the same kind of thing, but 50 megs working instead of 100 megs working, which is fine, with a 25 minimum HFE, which again is exactly the same as the 2078. So I think the thing to do at this stage is to fit the 2075. I don't like having to do that. It's a near equivalent of what was in. I'm trying to think how much these cost. These are sourced from a reputable UK source. Right, that's what we're going to have to do. And if this doesn't work out, the radio will have to be put on one side and we'll have to actually import something. Just get some thermal paste. Right, I've put those in. Now the other thing was that capacitor. When I look at the circuit diagram, capacitor 163 decouples the base of the output transistor. Or as part of the decoupling, it would be incomplete without it. And when I look at this smashed up board that I bought, it's there. So I'll tell you what, we'll pinch it off this board and that will cut costs again. I think most radios get smashed up not because I bet there was nothing wrong with this, it was just been, I think the phrase is farted about with till it died. So most of the time there are a few actual faulty parts. So pop that in. I'll pause the video while I do that because it may be long-winded as I feed it in on long-nosed pliers. Just going to make sure we've not got a short to chassis. The answer is no. Right, we'll power it back up. And see if now the best it'll do will be half a watt. Power supply on. Radio's lit up, drawing normal current. Let's see what we can do. So all this will be different now. I'll put picture in picture on, and then you can see what we've got, which is not a lot, 1.2 watts. I think we've got another fake transistor, folks. So despite that coming from where I know it's come from, I think we've been diddled. See what I can recover off a scrap chassis. But there we have the problem with the short leads. And by the time I buy scrap chassis, output transistors have long been pinched. So that AM set's long had it gone. I'll have a look round. As it happens, we've got a scrap DNT here, and it's got the 2SC2078 in there. So hopefully that isn't why it was scrapped. You'll be aware these got messed about with big time because they were easy to turn into 10 meters, but most of those alterations failed, and you never know what they've quite done. So, and they weren't that reliable set anyway. So we'll pop this out and try that. So this one gives an HFE of 93, so that seems higher than it should be, so hope we haven't got another fake. We've had a power outage and it's crashed the inset fixture. Well, that's where this video ends. I've ordered a replacement transistor. This radio will go on one side, and I don't know whether I said, but the fake transistor turns out to be fake. Sorry. The second-hand transistor out of the DNT also is fake, which is probably why the DNT had been scrapped, because it was only doing probably half a watt output. So, and somebody would be probably scratching their head as to why that was. So the clue really is when you're testing, and it's well worth having something like these type of testers that will show the HFE, because a lot of these transistors kicking around are going to be audio transistors that have had, which are manufacturer fallouts. They don't get the writing put on them at the factory until they've been tested. So for example, let's go back to the very British type of transistor like the BC108. You had BC108, BC107, BC108, BC109. And then you had A, B and C depending on the HFE, the amount of gain. So the best possible one would be BC109C, and the worst possible one would be BC107 without any A, B or C after it. Now you may have a switching application and the BC107 is absolutely spot on what you want, but you may have some amplification thing like a microphone preamplifier which needs low noise, etc., and so you'd want the BC109C for maximum gain and least noise. So it would differ, and of course the price differs as to how high grade the transistors are. So don't get the numbers put on them until they're tested. And you might find with 2SC2075 and 2SC2078 they don't get the 75 or 78 until they're graded as to what they work like. So what happens is these things get sold, these failures get sold. It doesn't mean they don't work at all, but they could easily be anything in a TO220 case. So someone's going to go around, test them whether they're MPN or PMP, and they're going to laser print a number on them these days. So a lot of these were painted at the time. See whether I can see this one which is a fake is laser. That one that came out which snapped, that 2SC2314, that's painted on. So there you go. If they've been laser done, they've probably been done a few years ago with modern techniques to produce fakes. So even this one we've taken out of a scrap DNT, I mean, I don't know the set's origin, and that turns out to be exactly the same, and so we'll have to wait. I've managed to order one which is quite a tarnished case, and that tells me it's genuine new old stock, because all these fake ones are really nice and shiny. So we'll be on to, I've told customer for box 8 that this is delayed and we're ordering a part, so this will go in a box out of the way, and we'll move on to box number 9 tomorrow. So no on the air test because we never got that far. But we'll be doing a return of the Maxcom 4E when this can be sorted. And this is why I don't do the microphone, I don't sort the power lead, because it's possible that the set can't be resurrected. That is always that possibility. So, thanks for watching the non-repaired Maxcom 4E from 1981.